Welcome to the Horror Next Door. This is all the horror movies we watched in August 2022. Links to our Letterboxd accounts are in the description box below. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. Prey from 2022, which we watched on Hulu. So based on the trailer that they released for this not too long ago, I was actually expecting this to not really be that good and probably be really bad. But I was actually very surprised by this one. It turned out to be really cool. I feel like there was some shoddy CGI work, but other than that, I thought the movie held up pretty well and I had a really fun time watching it. I really like the Predator in this movie. If you've seen the last Predator movie that came out, that's just called The Predator. I thought the Predators in that one looked kind of weird, but this one looked pretty cool. I recommend this movie. I think you should go check it out. It's really fun, especially if you like any of the previous Predator films. My only pet peeve though is the fact that this is called Prey. Not sure why they wouldn't use the word Predator in some way since it's an established brand, but it was still fun. Hopefully this will come to Blu-ray or something and I will pick it up.
I actually thought it was kind of cool that they named it Prey. I understand that it could be a little bit confusing to people trying to seek out the entire Predator series, but I think the meaning behind it is really cool. And the fact that this is almost like an origin type thing, if you will, it fits because there are parts in the film where the Predator himself sees, a wolf hunting a rabbit, or the human element of when our main character or other people are under attack and he reacts to it. The fact that they are out hunting because they think it's a cat that can attack their camp, and then it turns out they're actually hunting something far more dangerous. In the end, she turns the tables and she's no longer the prey, So I just think it was really, really cool and really well done. And I agree with Psycho. When I first saw the trailer, I just was like, wow, Hulu is releasing this. They produce this. It's kind of like when we talked about the Texas Chainsaw movie that Netflix was putting out. You automatically just kind of go, oh, a streaming service made it. So I also thought that it wasn't going to be nearly as good or enjoyable as it was, and I would definitely recommend it. The Evil Next Door from 2020, which we rented on a Netflix disc. To put it simply, and I think I liked a review on Letterboxd that says this exact thing, but this is a horror movie for people who have never seen horror movies. This would be a great introductory horror film for people that are trying to ease into horror or just have never seen one, because it was filled with every horror cliche you can possibly think of. The spooky haunted house with a history, the kid that sees and hears creepy things, the female that no one believes her, they all think she's crazy, even the actual entity or whatever you want to call it that is causing the trouble in this movie is pretty effing generic. So it definitely wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. It was just so predictable and just felt kind of a little bit of a slog to get through, simply because we have seen so many horror films and it was not offering anything new. So I really can't say I would recommend it.
The reason why I rented this is because it seems like every time I type in the Horror Next Door on YouTube to just go to our channel real quick for whatever reason, there's like a video that pops up for a trailer for The Evil Next Door. And I'm always like, what is The Evil Next Door? It keeps popping up every time I type in the Horror Next Door. So I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to throw it on my Netflix queue and check it out. But that being said, I do not recommend this movie. It is very run-of-the-mill and cliche. Sorry. Flatliners from 1990, which we rented on Netflix disc. So if you've been watching our What We Watched videos, you will know that we watched the 2017 remake of Flatliners a few months back, and I finally just got the original Flatliners, which I have never seen, and as expected, it is much better than the awful remake that we had to sit through. It does suck that I watched the awful remake before watching the original, but actually it kind of works out in a way because now I got that awful taste out of my mouth and now I can just remember this one instead of that one. I also kind of feel like I'm like a low-key fan of Kiefer Sutherland. He's in a bunch of random movies that I just happen to like, so I guess I'm a fan of his. I think he's really cool. This movie's also got a bunch of named people in it. The remake really didn't have anybody in it, which doesn't necessarily matter, but for such an older movie like this, it's cool that it's got all these people in it, and it's directed by Joel Schumacher as well. I would recommend this. Do not watch the 2017 version. Watch this instead.
I believe this was my second time viewing the film, and I was actually really excited to watch it again because I did remember liking it. And when we watched the 2017 version, I just couldn't even believe how crappy it was. I was definitely stoked to see this again. I'm surprised I didn't remember more about it because I feel like there's actually quite a few pretty gnarly or like creepy moments that are pretty memorable. Also, yeah, this cast is freaking stacked. Just like Psycho said, Kiefer Sutherland rules. I also really like Kevin Bacon. I would say I'm sort of a quote-unquote accidental fan of his too. I feel like I just keep seeing a lot of his stuff and realizing, wow, he's in a lot of good stuff. Now, the stuff he's been doing recently, you know, questionable. Like everybody has some bad stuff in their filmography, but I also recently watched the Amazon series Too Old to Die Young, and William Baldwin was in that. And between that, this and Curdled, I'm kind of like, am I also a William Baldwin fan? I don't know. There's just a lot of cool people in this, and I think it's really well acted, and I think it's so much more engaging and has so much more heart and soul than the remake. Can't really think of anything that I've liked Julia Roberts in more than this, except maybe Erin Brockovich, because I'm not a huge fan of hers. But it's cool to see her in a movie like this because she tends to do so many weepy things and like rom-coms and stuff. So yeah, it was really fun to see her in this. I definitely do recommend it. X-Cross from 2007, which I rented on a Netflix disc. I'm also noticing it's on Tubi, so if you want to check it out, it's real easy to do. Basically, I'm just super into a lot of Asian horror films, and there are a lot of really crazy, outlandish, weird films in the vein of Tokyo Gore Police and Machine Girl, and I think maybe I found this or was recommended this by Netflix because I watch quite a lot of movies like those. This wasn't quite that out of control, but it was definitely weird and over the top. This is one of those movies where you never know what the heck is going to happen next. I did think it was cool the way they did the time jumps. I felt like, am I watching Pulp Fiction for a minute? I feel like it was well done because a lot of the times when people do flashbacks and try to integrate them with what's currently happening in films, sometimes it gets really annoying or messy. I also thought it was cool the way they interwove a bunch of different like cell phone interactions into the story. I don't know. It is from 2007, you know, so I feel like a part of it is a nostalgia thing with everybody having like the old phones and, you know, no signal and just all this stuff. Personally, I would recommend it. I don't think it's the best thing in the world, but I do think it's fun. It hits right that 90-minute mark, so it's not too long. It doesn't overstay its welcome. I mean, just look at the cover. I don't even know. I think it's a fun watch.
I don't really have anything else to add to this other than just I had fun with this and I recommend that you check it out, and it's super weird. Room 33 from 2009, which we watched on a crappy horror movie pack, and if your heart desires, it's on Tubi. I really don't have much to say about this movie. It's kind of forgettable because I had to have Hellcat tell me things about it so I could remember it. Don't really recommend it unless you want to watch some ridiculous horror stuff at 2 a.m.
Unfortunately, this was my second time watching this. This happens to me quite a bit when we're going through my crappy horror movie packs because I watched some of them alone and Psycho wants to see them all. So I think there are worse, but that does not mean this movie is good in any way, shape, or form. I think my main thing is this Roxy character is just so annoying. I don't know if they dubbed a little girl's voice over the woman's actual voice or if that's how she really sounds, but it's just this screeching that makes your ears want to bleed. As far as the killer, I feel like that's not even really a part of the movie. The whole plot is supposed to be, oh, a killer is hunting these roller derby girls that are stranded at this asylum. Seriously, it's barely a part of the movie. I feel like hardly anything happens except a bunch of people like wandering around and yelling at each other. I certainly don't recommend it, unfortunately. Great White from 2021, which we rented on Netflix disc. Apparently, it is also now streaming on Shudder. However, do not waste your time. I think this movie was a garbage pile, and I actually didn't even want to watch it, but I did. Kind of. I wasn't fully paying attention the whole time because, like I said, it was stupid. I mean, I've seen worse movies in my life, but I definitely don't recommend this.
I also do not recommend this. One of my pet peeves here in 2022 is all these shark movies where the sharks are all CGI. And I understand CGI is easier to do than practical effects. But I mean, when you have a movie like Jaws that did practical effects back in the 70s and it still holds up to this day, and then you come out with this in 2021 and it's just bad looking. What are you doing? Why? That being said, do not recommend this movie. There's plenty of other things you could be watching. I just want to add one other thing. I was having a conversation with some friends and I said, I wonder what subgenre of horror has more films in it. Is it the shark subgenre or the zombie subgenre? Zombie's probably the winner, but I feel like these shark movies are just getting churned out lately. Let us know what you think. Orphan First Kill from 2022, which we watched on Paramount Plus. So I am a huge fan of the original Orphan film. I think it's really well done and still holds up. But when I heard that they were making this movie, I was like, why? What's the point? You know, and then also the actress that played the little girl in the original, she's all grown up now. It's going to look weird. She's supposed to be 10 or 12 or whatever. I don't know. I do feel like there's some weird CGI effects in this movie. And I saw recently on Instagram that apparently they were making the other actors wear platform shoes in certain scenes to make her look shorter. And apparently she was sitting in a chair at times to seem shorter. The movie just really isn't that good, in my opinion. I was really disappointed by it. I think one of the aspects that I don't like is the fact that they made the Esther character just super crazy in this one. This is supposed to take place before the original Orphan, and in the original Orphan, it was like a slow unraveling of her becoming, you know, more and more crazy. Like this one was like, I'm crazy all the time. Look at me, you know. I didn't like that. The other thing that I didn't like is I just felt like the opening of the film was super rushed. All the stuff with her escaping the insane asylum or whatever. I just felt like it was too convenient. Everything was very, this just happened to happen. So now she's doing this and this just happened to happen. And now she's just, oh, she's out. And we're like 5 minutes into the movie. And I actually turned to Hellcat and said, you know, they could have made the entire movie in the insane asylum. That could have been the entire movie. And then at the end, she gets out, and that's the setup to her coming to America and doing all the shit that she did with all the families and everything. But the prequel aspect of it is just her in the asylum and getting out. But they rush through that in like 10 minutes, and everything's just so convenient. I'm like, what is going on? We were kind of laughing at it at one point. We're like, well, this is going to happen. And then it happened. And this is going to happen. And then it happened. I digress. I do not recommend it. Go watch the original. It's much better.
I don't write a whole lot of reviews on Letterboxd, but I did write a review on this one. So if you'd like to check that out, it says everything I have to say about it. In addition, I don't have a whole lot to add to what Psycho said. What I will say is that I was certainly disappointed with it. I don't really know necessarily what I was expecting out of it. It seemed like a weird idea to make a prequel for this in the first place. I just think it was unnecessary, and unfortunately, I can't recommend it. Vampire Journals from 1997, which we watched on a crappy horror movie pack. This is also my second time watching this one. I did not, however, have any clue that it was supposed to be a part of the Subspecies series of films. It really has nothing to do with any of the Subspecies films. I think someone says Radu's name once, and that's about it. So if you were going to watch this because you like Subspecies, maybe don't, because it's a lot more boring and there's a lot less blood. However, despite all of this, a part of me did still like it. I think I have a weird soft spot for vampire movies. I don't know. I just love them, and I'm into all the vampire lore and stuff. I also just think that this looked really effing cool. The locations and sets were almost always awesome. The costumes were pretty awesome. I don't think the makeup was that great. The head vampire or whatever sort of had like 80s hair metal band hair. But there were also some really cool special effects like decapitations and stuff. I don't know. I just think that a lot of the dialogue was very emo and corny, like bad poetry type stuff. But I just think the overall aesthetic and vibe of this movie made me like it, even though there's really hardly anything going on. So I would very loosely recommend it, but it's also kind of boring. So I guess I recommend it with a little caution sign. Maybe if you're into vampires, you could check it out.
So the same crappy horror movie pack that has Vampire Journals on it also has the first two Subspecies movies. And we recently have just gotten around to watching Subspecies 1 and 2. We will be talking about that in our next Letterboxd video. But for now, I just want to say that I kind of dig those movies more than this one. I don't really recommend this one. Didn't really have that much fun with it. Salem's Lot from 1979, which we watched on Shudder. So this was my first viewing of this film, and I'll just say that it's one of those quote-unquote classics that I haven't gotten around to seeing yet, and I'm finally seeing it. And that being said, I just feel like this movie, well, I say it's a movie, but I know it was like 2 or 3 part mini-series of some kind, but it's presented as a movie. It's 184 minutes, so it's super long. I do feel like it kind of drags a little bit. I feel like there's lots of gaps where nothing really eventful is going on, and because of that, I feel like kind of lost me a little bit. There is some really cool vampire scenes in the movie, but I feel like if you've seen any of the GIFs online of some of those key scenes, which I have, seen before seeing this movie, if you've seen those, you've pretty much seen all the best parts and you probably don't need to watch it. I guess I would say I would recommend this because it is directed by Tobe Hooper. I feel like out of all the Stephen King adaptations, this one really kind of missed the mark for me.
I feel like I recall having seen this on TV when I was a youngling, but I definitely know I never finished it. There's no way this would have held my attention as a child because it barely held my attention now. And I hate to say that because I just got done talking about how much I like vampires. But the awesome Nosferatu looking head vampire is barely in this movie. And there's really not a lot of vampire stuff going on. I think they kind of parodied this a little bit in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie. Like I recall David Arquette floating outside of his friend's window or something. Like Psycho said, this has its place in horror history as being very notable and having a lot of memorable things about it. I just didn't find it super engaging. I do recommend it at least to see once. I'm not sure if there is an audience that would watch this over and over, especially because of its length, but I would still recommend it. Patchwork from 2015, which we watched on good old Tubi. We would like to thank our Letterboxd friend Horror Sage for recommending this to us in the comments of one of our prior YouTube videos because we really enjoyed it. It was an awesome time. It was very unique and odd, and it reminded me of Frankenhooker or something. I don't even know how to explain this movie. It's so nuts. It has a lot of really great humor to it. It's got some funny and weird body horror stuff, some gross stuff. I definitely recommend this. I just don't want to say too much because I feel like going into this blind is probably the best thing you can do. But I freaking love the Owlcat hilariousness. Go watch this movie.
I would also recommend this movie. It was super fun. I will say that when we first turned it on, I wasn't as into it, but as things started progressing, I got more and more into it. And by the end, I was just having a blast with it. I don't want to say too much without giving everything away, but I do like how they filmed the 3 main women and how they interacted with one another and thought it was really cool. This was just a perfect blend of horror and comedy, and I like a lot of horror comedy, so definitely recommend it. You should go check it out. And thanks, Horror Sage, for the recommendation. If anybody else has any recommendations, please leave a comment below. Meridian from 1990, which we watched on a crappy horror movie pack, and it's also on Tubi. There is certain elements of this movie that I am not going to talk about here, but you could probably read the synopsis or Google it and see what I'm talking about. That being said, This movie is weird, but not in a good way like X-Cross. I feel like the only reason why I enjoyed getting through it was the fact that it had Sherilyn Fenn in it, which I only know because Hellcat had me watch Twin Peaks, which I also recommend. But other than her, there's really not anything real redeemable about this movie. So I would say pass.
There's such awkward stuff in this movie. I really don't like it, and I can't believe I've seen it more than once. I'm really, really surprised that Sherilyn Fenn wanted to do this movie. I don't know. I just feel like if I were an actress and I was reading the script, I would sort of be like, I think I'll pass here. I hope she got some decent pay or something, but like Psycho said, Sherilyn Fenn, aka Audrey from Twin Peaks, aka Helena from Boxing Helena. I just like her. And then I also kind of like Charlie Spradling, or as she's credited in this, just Charlie, because she's also in Mirror Mirror and one of the Puppet Masters, and just keeps randomly popping up in a bunch of movies. And I really liked Mirror Mirror when I was a kid, so whenever I see her in something, I'm like, oh, it's her. I really can't recommend this movie. So to round things out, I do have a horror movie that I watched on my own. It's called Entrance. It's from 2012, and I rented it on a Netflix disc. This is an indie film that did seem to have quite a low budget, but you can tell that it was made with a lot of heart and a lot of effort, and I think that all of that paid off. I don't feel like at any point during watching this movie I was just rolling my eyes and annoyed by, a little indie film that doesn't have a lot of money. I know some people automatically judge films like that, which bugs me a little bit, because you can find a lot of really good gems like this if you will give more of those types of things a chance. The only reason Psycho didn't watch it with me is because a lot of the things that I was reading online about it, like reviews and plot descriptions and things, were people saying that it was really, really slow and it was so boring and stuff didn't happen until the very end. But in all honesty, as soon as the movie ended, I was going back through and skipping around to look at certain scenes over again, because the crazy conclusion to this, it's just wild. Like, I think it's worth the buildup, and I was never bored. I think the whole thing makes you feel this weird unease and tension. And once I knew the outcome, I went back to watch some parts of the film again because I remembered seeing certain things or predicting certain things, and I wanted to confirm. It's the kind of thing you would see more than once because they're hinting around at certain things the whole time. So I definitely recommend it, and perhaps I shall watch it again with Psycho. As always, we thank you so much for watching. Leave us a comment if you have any horror movie recommendations, and we will add them to our watch list. Until next time.